It kind of feels like the US economy is walking on a tightrope. Some folks think it's about to face a major deleveraging, which is just a fancy way of saying a really painful period of paying down debt. So today, we're going to dive into the cracks that are starting to show in the system, and we'll explore a wild theory about a secret escape hatch the government might just have up its sleeve. So how fragile is it really? Well, it turns out the entire structure is incredibly sensitive, and it all boils down to one single powerful concept that our entire economy is built on. And that concept is leverage. Put simply, it's just using debt. But here's the thing you have to understand. We're not just talking about one person taking out a loan. We're talking about everybody, from homeowners with their mortgages to the banks lending them the money, all the way up to the US government itself. Every single layer is built on leverage. It's like a giant tower of playing cards, just waiting for a breeze. And this quote just nails it, right? Leverage is a double-edged sword. When things are going well, it's amazing. It juices your returns. But when things go south, it multiplies your losses, and the whole system becomes connected. One domino falls, they all fall. Just think back to the 2008 financial crisis. Now, this is the part that's just staggering. It took less than 5% of all US mortgages going bad to trigger the entire global financial collapse. That's it. Less than 5%. That's the terrifying power of the domino effect in a system with this much leverage. All right, so that brings us to today. What are the dominoes that could start a new chain reaction? Let's go investigate some of the hidden risks that are forming just under the surface. Okay, the first crack we're looking at is a $3 trillion behemoth called the private credit market. You can kind of think of it as a shadow banking system. You've got these huge firms lending money to all sorts of companies. So where's that money coming from? Well, it's coming from pension funds, insurance companies, even our own 401ks. And there's very little regulatory oversight. And listen, when the CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world says something like this about a market, yeah, that should send a chill down your spine. It's a pretty clear warning that whatever problems we can see are probably just the tip of the iceberg. And those problems, they're not some far-off theory. They're happening right now. Investors are getting spooked, and they're trying to pull their money out in record numbers. And what are these giant firms doing? They're putting up gates. They're telling investors, nope, sorry, you can't have your money back right now. And as you can imagine, their stock prices are absolutely getting hammered. The second big crack is something we all feel at the pump, the price of oil. Throughout modern history, a major spike in oil prices has been one of the most reliable red flags that a recession is right around the corner. I mean, the track record is undeniable. Just look at this. The oil embargo in '73, the Iranian Revolution in '79, the Gulf War in '90, and that huge price spike just before the 2008 crisis. Almost every single time oil prices have shot up like this, a major recession has followed right behind it. The pattern is unsettling. And the third crack, well, it's the biggest one of all. It's the US government's massive spending problem. And we're not just talking about the $38 trillion national debt. We're talking about the fact that the government spends nearly $2 trillion more than it collects in taxes every single year. That's not sustainable. Okay, so here's where it gets really crazy. Look at where your tax dollars actually go. About 70% goes to mandatory stuff like Social Security and Medicare. The other 30%? That goes to pay just the interest on the national debt. That's it. 100% of all tax revenue is already spent before we buy a single tank, pay the single road, or fund a single school. All of that is paid for with more borrowed money. So you get this combination of problems, and it puts the Federal Reserve, the one institution that's supposed to ride in and save the day, in a state of absolute checkmate. They're trapped. There are no good moves left on the board. So the Fed basically has two big jobs: keep people employed and keep prices from going crazy. To fight a recession, they cut interest rates to get things moving. To fight inflation, they raise rates to cool things down. But here's the trap. A big oil spike causes both problems at the same time. It kills jobs and it causes inflation. Their tools are in direct conflict with each other. So if the Fed cuts interest rates to fight off a recession, those high oil prices could send inflation into the stratosphere. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can only fight one of these fires at a time. Trying to do both at once, well, that's checkmate. So with all these cracks in the system and the Fed completely stuck, is there any way out? Well, this leads us to a really surprising, pretty speculative theory about a potential golden escape hatch. It all starts with a fact that is honestly just mind-boggling. The US government owns about 8,000 tons of gold, and on its official books, it values that gold at just $42.22 an ounce. That price hasn't been updated since 1973. Meanwhile, what's the actual market price for that same ounce of gold today? Well, it's over $5,000. So the theory goes like this. The US Treasury could simply decide, you know what, we're going to revalue our gold to what it's actually worth. And with a stroke of a pen, this little accounting magic trick would instantly create over $1.2 trillion in new assets on the government's balance sheet. Just like that. And if this all sounds completely nuts to you, you should know this isn't a new idea. The US government has literally done this 3 times before. FDR did it back in 1934 to fight the Great Depression, and then Nixon did it not once but twice in the early 70s. Each time, it was an emergency measure to fix the government's books when they ran out of other options. Okay, so the obvious question is why on earth would they dust off this old playbook and even think about doing this now? Well, the theory points to 2 really powerful strategic goals. First, it's a way to instantly make the government's finances look a whole lot better without having to go through the political nightmare of raising taxes or cutting popular spending programs. And second, it could be used as an escape valve, a powerful new tool to deal with that dangerous oil price problem we talked about. So how would that escape valve work? Well, the US could go to oil-producing nations and offer them a deal. Something like, we'll buy your oil, but instead of paying you in dollars, we'll pay you in our newly revalued gold. For the oil producer, they get an asset that's potentially worth a lot more than the dollars. And for the US, it could be a way to bring down energy prices and break that cycle of inflation. And that's really the heart of this whole idea. Could this be the ultimate backdoor solution? A way to stabilize the entire financial system, fix some of its biggest problems, and do it all without having to fire up the money printers again? So what are we supposed to make of all this? Is this some kind of secret emergency plan locked away in a vault for the next big crisis? Or is it just a fascinating what-if scenario to think about? For now, nobody really knows for sure. But it definitely gives you something to think about, doesn't it?